as evening drew on, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us cross to the other side." Leaving the crowd, they took Jesus with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. A violent squall came up, and waves were breaking over the boat, so that it was already filling up. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. They woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Quiet, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith?" They were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, whom even wind and sea obey?" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
In the summer of 2013, I was still in seminary, and I did a summer camp out in Colorado called Camp Wautewa. Does anybody know who Camp Wautewa is named after? Kind of trivia for everybody. Wautewa. Anybody know? Pope John Paul II. Right? Pope John Paul II. His natural name was Karol Wojtyła. Right? So I was at this summer camp called Camp Wautewa out in Colorado, and it was a really awesome experience being up in the mountains all summer. And I slept in a hammock all summer in Colorado, which was pretty amazing. And people thought I was weird when I came back to Zionsville, and I still kept sleeping in a hammock in our backyard. We were a little strange, but it got so used to sleeping outdoors. It was really neat being able to sleep under the stars. And one of my vivid memories from Camp Wautewa is that it was an awesome experience, but about once a week there would be a really intense thunderstorm, right? And we were up in the mountains, right? So basically like defenseless. And if you've ever been camping and been caught in a storm, you know how terrifying it is. And some of you might be familiar with something called lightning protocol. How many of you are familiar with lightning protocol? Right, not very many of you, right? You're fortunate, okay? Lightning protocol, basically, when you're in the woods in a thunderstorm, you're told that you basically have two options. Right? The first option is if you have a backpack, you basically crouch down and you grab your knees and you don't let any part of your body touch the ground. Right? So that basically if lightning strikes the ground, it's going to go up through your butt, back down through the backpack. Okay? The other lightning protocol is if you don't have a backpack, you stand on your tippy toes, you put your heels together, and you crouch down. Right? Lightning protocol. Okay? The third option, which is the most common option for me, is just let God kill you. Okay? So, obviously, lightning protocol, it was not very practical. Okay? You're sitting in a thunderstorm for 2 hours, you're not going to be in lightning protocol. So, anyway, I was reminded of that this weekend as we think about this gospel passage of Jesus calming the storm, right, with the disciples. And as I was praying over these readings, a couple of things that stood out to me that I never really noticed before, and maybe it's new to you all as well. But notice when Jesus and the disciples, when they went out onto the sea and they got caught in the storm, sometimes we forget, or maybe we don't notice, that it was actually Jesus' idea to go out onto the sea. It was Jesus' idea to go out onto the sea. Now, Bible or theology trivia question for you guys. Could Jesus predict the weather? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, he's God. It was his idea to take the disciples out into the boat, into the sea where he knew there would be this extremely violent and dangerous storm. I was thinking about that. How important it is for us to remember that Jesus' main goal in our lives is not to protect us from the storms. His main objective is not to protect us from danger. And that might sound simple, but how often do we forget that? I mean, how often most people, when they leave the faith, or when they leave the church, or they stop coming to church, what's the number one reason so many people give? I was praying to God for this thing, and God just didn't answer me. Where was God when my friend was dying? Where was God when I was losing my job? Where was God when I was so depressed? Why didn't he save me? Why didn't he hear my prayers? God's main objective is not to protect us from storms. And there's an obvious reason why. God is a good father. He wants us to become strong and courageous. And so, of course, the only way to become strong and courageous is to be challenged, to have to encounter dangerous things. Jesus was training his disciples in that storm that there's going to be much worse storms that were going to come. When the apostles would be arrested, when they would be killed, when they would face great opposition. They had to learn how to deal with the storm. So that's the first point about this passage. It was actually Jesus' idea to go out on the storm. And the second thing I never noticed before as I was reading the passage this weekend is that why did they have to cross the sea? Why was Jesus adamant about them going to the other side of that sea? Does anybody know what was on the other side of the sea? It was the land of the Gentiles, the land of the pagans. And the first person that Jesus encountered when he got to the shore of the sea, anybody remember who it was? It was a man possessed by demons, the Gerasene demoniac, a truly frightening person that basically had lived in chains for 12 years and nobody would ever go and see him or talk to him because he was controlled by this demon. Terrifying spectacle. Jesus wanted to cross the sea so that he could begin to convert the Gentiles. That he could free this person possessed by devils. But it was scary. Now, I bring this up because, again, it's a reminder to us that if we are ever going to accomplish something for God, that when you decide to do something for God, you know what's going to happen? There's going to be very scary things that try to get in your way. There's going to be a resistance that is placed in your path. You know, all throughout the Bible, what happened when Moses and the Israelites, when they wanted to be liberated from Egypt? Pharaoh told them no. He chased them with his armies. They got to the Red Sea, and it was all of a sudden this huge obstacle that Moses had to part with them. When the Israelites were traveling through the wilderness on their way to the Promised Land, what happened? All sorts of pagan armies rose up against them and tried to defeat them in battle. When they finally got to the Promised Land and they got to Jericho, what did they say? The walls are too high, we can never conquer this city. The people of this city, they're too big and strong and numerous. We can never win this war. There's always going to be resistance. Even when Jesus came, what happened to Jesus? The devil threw everything that he could possibly throw on the cross. There's a reason why when Jesus took up the cross, it was the 6th hour of the day on the 6th day of the week, right? The number of evil. It was like the ultimate battle between good and evil. When we choose to do something for God, we're inevitably going to encounter challenges and resistance and obstacles. And we shouldn't be surprised by that. I've had numerous people in my time in ministry that have told me, you know, once they start getting more involved in their faith and in their church, all of a sudden, all these obstacles start to happen. People they love start to get sick. They start to have difficulties in their jobs or in their families. I know that a number of weeks ago I was doing the Cursillo retreat, as you guys know. And inevitably, people always share just before Cursillo happens, there's always like this huge storm of things that happens in people's personal lives. It's the devil trying to intimidate us. When we want to do something for God, there's always going to be obstacles that come, storms that come, that are going to try to get in our way. We need to remember that. Don't be surprised by that. When you choose to serve God, it's going to make somebody very unhappy. We need to be prepared for that. Now, last thing about the calming of the storm and these storms come, the last point for us to remember, and again, maybe it's the most simple point of all, but when we are trying to serve God, and when the obstacles are placed in our path, What do we need to do? You know, the disciples, they could have tried to row that boat the whole night. They could have tried to do everything they could to survive the storm. But eventually they had to go to Christ. The only way of being saved. Sometimes when we are going through the storms, when we are encountering the obstacles, what's the last thing we want to do? Go to Christ. You know, we might say, you know, Jesus, do this or that thing for me. But it's different to do that than to say something like, Jesus, I'm just going to give this to you. I'm going to let you take control of this. Remember when I was in seminary, I was so you guys know there was a time in seminary where I was kind of really struggling with the place I was studying. And it felt like everything I was trying to do to make the situation better, it's like nothing worked. It's almost like it made it even worse. And I was trying so hard to fix all the problems I was encountering. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And eventually I had to realize that the reason why it was getting worse and worse is because it was like I was driving the boat all by myself. I wasn't actually asking Christ what he was trying to do, why he was letting all these things happen, what he was trying to teach me. Sometimes in life, sometimes the things that we think are like the worst possible thing that could happen to us, sometimes those things are actually good for us. And if we would just take a step back and let God show us and lead us, we would begin to understand that. Sometimes in life, we have to learn how to see how God sees. Sometimes some terrible tragedies in your life might be the very thing that becomes your salvation. Sometimes the things that you think are the biggest loss are actually the things that are going to most prepare you for what God truly wants you to do with your life. But we have to let God in. Not just asking for help, but asking for direction. To let go of control. There's a great prayer that I would encourage everybody to consider to make a part of your daily prayer. It's something that I learned in seminary. It's called the Examen prayer. And the Examen prayer is basically, when you pray, instead of opening up the Bible or instead of praying a rosary or doing some devotional, you just take 10 minutes and you don't say anything to God. And you ask that God be with you. And you begin to reflect on the day that came before and the day that's going to come up ahead. And the only question you ask is, God, where are you leading me? Where were you leading me? What were the times that I missed, where you were trying to show me? Or you think about the people in your life that you find the most difficult. That person at work, or the disobedient child, or your resentful spouse. God, how do you see that person? And God, I want you to show me, what can I do differently to make this situation better? And you begin to reflect on your life, right? And you stop living as if it's just you on the boat. And you're starting to let Christ take the lead. Show you what he's trying to do. We're never going to avoid the storms, but at least we won't be alone. And too many of us, we go about our lives, right? Myself included. And we act as if it's just me all by myself. We have to learn how